Oh, hey there. What's going on, friends? So, as a podcaster myself, a lot of the times comparing, like I think a lot of us do, to the GOAT, Joe Rogan. Whether you believe in his methods or not, there is a reason why he's so successful, and it might not be the reason that you think. So, I actually put together 5 reasons why Joe Rogan's so successful. Now, of course, as a podcast host, I can kind of relate to a little bit of what he goes through. Obviously, not on the massive scale that he does, but Joe Rogan's so big that there's thousands of channels that try to take advantage of that clickbait and put together clips of different episodes that he does, formulates them, changes them up, and takes things out of context. So a lot of the times, if you don't listen to him, you might think that one of the clips you saw that went viral or whatever is who he is. I've been a huge fan of him for a long time. Before Fear Factor days on news radio, I thought news radio was very underrated. He's been a great stand-up comedian, and I've seen all of his specials. I've seen him live a bunch. Of course, when he got into the podcast world, I probably realistically started to listen to him maybe like 8 years ago. When I really started getting deep into podcasts, I was listening to him, Gary Vee. I think that's when Dax Shepard came on and started doing podcasting, so I got obsessed with him. The reason I think Joe Rogan is a lot different, and a lot of people look up to him, including myself, you look at his podcast originally, the 5 things that he does really, really well. I'm going to break them down. So number 5 is he's just being him, and it's hard again because all these clips get taken out of context. But if you listen to him and have seen his stand up, like this is who he is. He's a very experimental type of guy. He's very objective. He hasn't always been like that. He's gotten better in the course of him having such a huge platform. And I think he's admitted that many times on the podcast, to where he's been able to kind of get better at listening through interviewing thousands of people, including what he does on UFC, right? Because UFC, he's also interviewing people. He's a commentator. So, he has to be mindful of everything that he says. So I think that's kind of trained him a little bit. But at the end of the day, he's just being him. There just so happens to be millions of people watching, and he's recording these conversations on the podcast. I think he's on like episode 1800 or something. But if you go back to the very first episode, it's relatively the same. Of course, the equipment has changed and the location in the studio, but you can actually look up episode 1 where he's on his laptop, talking with his buddies, shooting the shit, smoking, drinking, just having a gay old time. That is him, and when you can appreciate that, and when you look at all those episodes, you can really formulate a good idea of who that person is. Thousands of followers that I have, whether on my podcast or on social media, I like to think even if I don't know them, I could DM them and they probably got a good idea of who I am. So if you follow a guy like him, like Joe Rogan, for a decade, and you listen to 1,800 plus episodes, you know where his heart really is. I think that's the problem with a lot of things we're dealing with, right, in social media, is because you don't necessarily get a feel for certain people just by headline reading or just by watching one clip. It's hard to kind of grasp who that person is. And I think we're so quick to snap because, again, we're at this stage in life where you look at a clip, it's out of context, or you look at a person, it's out of context, or a post, and you can't really formulate a long thought because your first instinctual reaction is to say something in the comments. You want to do that because you don't necessarily have any repercussions. Like, if you really think about it, you could say something in the comments and there's no blowback. There's nothing that's going to happen to you by doing that. You can be confrontational without any consequences. And that's a huge problem right now in social media. Imagine if it was a FaceTime comment. So like you had to FaceTime someone to make a comment, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but if I was to talk to someone face to face, I'm a different human being. If I'm driving down the road and someone cuts me off in traffic, I will say unspeakable things to that human being in the comfort of my vehicle. With the windows up, I am yelling and screaming at that person as if I would do harm to them, like physical harm. If I'm walking inside like a Kroger or a Publix and someone cuts me off with their shopping cart, they say, "Excuse me." I go, "Hey, no worries." Like, because it's face to face, if that's interaction, you would not flick them off and try to bump into their cart with your cart and play bumper carts. Like, that's just not how we are face to face. A lot of us, a majority of us at least, are compassionate enough to be understanding for one human to another. That's kind of the problem with seeing these clips. But a dude is not that good to where he can fake it for 15 years and be this person. You might not like that person, that's okay, but that's who he is. So if you don't like him, or if you don't like his message or what he's saying or who he's interviewing, you don't have to watch it. I mean, there's millions of people that I don't like, and I just choose not to consume their content. I'm not going to be mean to them. Why would I? Well, like, what's the benefit of me talking smack to someone that I'm never going to meet? I think that's why he is one of the, if not the best interviewer on the planet, is because it's him just being him. And that's also what attracted me to start my podcast, is because I listened to him a decade ago. And I didn't, really get the balls to start a podcast until about 3 years ago. But I listened to him and I'm like, oh, this doesn't have to be like an interview. Like we could just shoot the shit and talk with our friends. What? I do that anyway. Why not record it? So number 4, another reason why he's massively successful is over the years, he's had a lot of sponsorship deals. You look at like the companies that he sponsors. He sponsors companies that I think, at least again, he's really good at it, promoting that he uses or that he believes in. And he's honest with you. He'll tell you, I just started using this company, or I haven't used this company before, but I just started using them and I love them. Like, it's that type of ad that he puts out there that's very unique. It's very genuine. It's very similar to like the UGC style, user generated content. You hear that a lot on social media. His style of ads is like that a lot, to where he'll just kind of shoot the shit about the advertisement. He's picked up hundreds of deals over the years. And I imagine that's how he accumulated a lot of wealth prior to his massive deal on Spotify, of course, which is $100 million deal, by the way. Number 3, his producer, young Jamie. Again, if you've listened to his podcast, or you might have heard him say in some of the clips.
Well, Jamie, pull up that video.
That is the guy that has been behind the video rather, switching cameras. I would imagine there's a lot of other internal stuff that we don't even know. Having some type of producer, having someone that takes a lot of the slack of fact checking, changing cameras and checking audio levels and legitimately producing the show. It is a lot of work. Again, I do this all myself. I'll show you a clip here, but I use the Rodecaster Pro, and I'm going to do a whole video on how I podcast. But it's super interesting how you look at like any type of big show where they have a lot of money. When they have their own producer, the content of that podcaster, like the interviewer, you could tell it's, not that I'm stressed when I interview people, but I'm always worried about, is the levels good? Is this going to be okay? Is the audio okay? I got to check this. There's so much stress that's involved. I'm not as focused as I think I could be if I could just focus on the interview and not worry about anything else. It would be a better conversation. It'd be more of a fly on the wall conversation. Just in general, he's just very good at what he does, very knowledgeable on tech, and you have to be when you're doing a high quality podcast. Number 2, generating clips. He's been doing this for years, but the actual clips, and I would imagine Jamie has a big portion of this too. I'm not really sure. I haven't dived too deep into Jamie's role, but I would imagine he probably does a marker every time something that Jamie thinks is going to be viral. And then they go back and they actually cut up a clip, whether that's a 5-minute clip, 10-minute clip, and they post that on YouTube. And they have a whole channel, JRE Clips, that gets millions of views. And not only does that get people interested in that topic, but if you notice the actual clips that get pulled, the titles of the clips, everything is very strategic. It's not really clickbaity, but it kind of is. They're very good at reading the YouTube algorithm. And because they don't do clips on Spotify, they just do the full episodes on Spotify. So not only is he getting money from Spotify, but he's getting paid by YouTube for his YouTube clips because he can't put his episodes on there. So just the clips themselves is huge. And he's making, I would imagine, a ton of money off on the back end for advertisements for that as well. As a podcaster, you have to video the podcast because you want to make sure you at least, if you're not going to clip those now, have that catalog of video so that you can clip it in the future. And number 1, this is probably, I think, the most important reason why Joe Rogan is so successful. It's long form podcasts. He, to me, I think, has mastered and really started this revolution of long form podcasts. Back in the day, it used to be very interview style, very radio style, broadcast radio that turned into podcasting. But if you really look at it, there's really no other outlet that you can consume, whether that's TV, movies, streaming services. There's really nothing that compares to podcasting, whether it's video or audio. What's great about it is I can watch something on YouTube, a podcast, for example, and then I could start that up in my car the second it goes in my car. So now it could just be audio. It doesn't just have to be video. The fact that I can go back and forth and it's a long form conversation is huge because in most cases, like Rogan, it's typically unedited. They might cut up things in the beginning and the end, but the majority of his podcasts are long form, unedited, and they do it on purpose, right? Because they don't want to be misleading. They don't want to give the media a chance to talk shit about the podcast. So they leave everything raw where it's just a long form podcast. Because you know what? Here's the thing, right? A big reason why I started a podcast, like most people, I think, is I just like having conversations with people. Like I was mentioning earlier with everyone in the comment section. There's been, if you go through my social media, if I get into a quote unquote debate with people in the comment section, more often than not, I end it saying, hey, listen, man, this is a long topic. Why don't you DM me? We'll hop on the podcast and we'll shoot the shit for a bit. And that's how I get a lot of my guests. Sometimes I agree with them on the podcast, sometimes I don't, but it doesn't really matter if you agree or disagree. The point of the podcast is to put both ideas out there. And hopefully both people use critical thinking skills and can have a good conversation with each other without being argumentative. Disagreeing is okay. Being argumentative is where you want to stay away from. And that's where you get like these short CNN and Fox, news broadcasts where they're going back and forth. Even ESPN is the fucking worst. That's why I don't even watch ESPN ESPN anymore, is everyone's going back and forth and yelling and screaming, no, the Jets this, no, the Dolphins that. Like, who cares, man? Like, if you're going to do that, give me 3 hours of that. Don't give me commercial breaks. Don't give me you going back and forth and changing the topics really quick. Like, let someone have a full thought, however long that takes. It might take an hour, but these quick little 10-minute interviews that happen on like daytime TV, the Jimmy Fallon show and all that stuff, all those quick interviews, it doesn't give the individual a chance to really talk. So that's what he's done beautifully, Joe Rogan, is he's created this medium to where it's so popular and people want to consume it. They want the real authentic interview. Just tons of great benefits to podcasting, but I think that's the biggest reason he's been so successful is because we do disagree on a lot of stuff. And until he started his show, it's given people without a voice if they hop on the show because he lets them talk and he lets these conversations go wherever they want to go. From my knowledge of the research I've done and listening to the show, he doesn't prepare questions. He just presses record and shoots the shit. And that's how I do my podcast. And I don't know if a lot of people do their podcasts like that. But, I think it's so important that we do because I always looked at a podcast as if you're going to sit down with a friend and just talk, record it. That's a podcast. If you're not going to do it for someone else to listen to, do it for yourself. I really want to leave as a legacy is to have my content out there forever. Good or bad, I want it to be out there because this is who I am. Imagine how stressful it is to be a historian, to do research on different subjects and people and places, but you don't have all the data. You don't have all the journalings and the writings. You don't have everything you need to formulate a really concrete thesis of that particular topic. In 30 years, 40 years, people are going to be able to look back on every episode I did and say, boom, he did that. Boom, he did that. He had that disease. He had this. I think that's super cool. You take it out of the ground in 50 years like a time capsule, like that idea is really cool. But we're able to do that right now. We're able to create our own kind of like world where someone could look back in 50 years and say, look at this person, look what they did. And there's something really special in that. So there's a lot of reasons why he is successful. These are just 5 I pulled out of my ass, but I think they're relevant. And I think if you want to start a podcast, you should check out my other videos because I've done a lot of videos on what to do to start a podcast, the top reasons you should start a podcast, and then of course some other stuff as well. But if you did enjoy any part of this video, it would mean the world if you give me a little subscribe. You know where to go. But stay healthy, friends. Peace. Oh, hey there. First of all, thanks for making it to the end of this video. Not a lot of people do, according to the YouTube analytics, but I do want to say thanks for listening to this. There's some more episodes if you want to check those out, and they're all just as good. But if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out those timestamps below to reference some of the topics I talked about, as well as some discount links to some of our sponsors and affiliates. But thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.